Did you know
Episode 19.
that the tulips you see in the asylum give you clues about where over 200 people used to live, year-round? Between 1889 to 1893, a total of 3 cottages were built to house patients from the Kalamazoo Psychiatric Hospital. In 1908, the Rich Cottage was built. It served as the nurses' dormitory as well as providing additional rooms for overflow patients. First up, the Mitchell Cottage, with daffodil clues. You are here. But first, all of the cottages had adjacent gardens which were planted and cared for by the patient residents that lived in that cottage. Which means that all of the daffodil patches you see were most likely planted over 100 years ago. Wait a minute.
Daffodils in Motel?
Daffys first grew in Spain, Portugal, southern France and North Africa. The bulbs are too heavy to be carried by animals. All the daffys you see are the result of a human digging a hole and planting. The initial bulb will flower for 5 years or more, then will propagate by making daughter bulbs. What this all means is that the daffys you see are a clue to not only where the cottages were located but also can be a clue as to the actual outline of the cottage structure.
You're now at the site of the Mitchell Cottage that was built in 1889 and housed about 30 to 50 patrons from the psychiatric hospital. And if you look very, very close, you see some debris from the Mitchell. There's some, bricks. The house, the cottage itself was made with bricks. And you can see some of the piping left over from the days the water system actually went downhill towards the lake in a sandy area. But interestingly, if you look, you begin to see some daffodils. And if you look carefully, you begin to see a line of daffodils. So this area here was outside the south-north wall. And if you look up ahead, there's another patch of daylilies which probably represent the area outside the front door of the Mitchell Cottage. Let's take a look at that. So now we're looking back at where I was, looking as if I were in the front of the Mitchell house on the north end, looking south. And I was in that area here. And down there was the area where I think, and there's some remnants of stone, where the tunnels were at. And then this is the line of tulips that somebody planted by hand. So this would have been towards the front porch area. And there were sidewalks, by the way, that connected all the cottages. So this was probably lining one of the sidewalks. And overlooking here in the distance, you can probably see the Asylum Lake. Yep, planted by hand, all of them.
What it might have looked like in the spring of 1899. Next up, the Rich Cottage. No pictures available. You are here.
So coming up the walkway, you begin to see rows of daffodils going across and then coming down and across. And then you see all this woodland here. This was actually the site of the Rich Cottage that was built in 1909. It was actually a dormitory. If you were a nurse, you had to live at the dormitory. Your typical day was 12 hours, 6 days a week, and you made a grand total of 20 cents an hour, which converted to today's dollars would be about, $620, $40, something like that per week. So things haven't changed that much. Anyhow, there's really no remnants of the Rich Cottage. It was totally obliterated by the folks, but you can sort of get a drift that this area here, this line, probably represents the front of the Rich Cottage as it faced the road. A bit to the west of where that last shot was at, and you can see this is a retaining wall from the Rich Cottage. Apparently had a garage on the backside, and then you see a stone here, and there's one a little bit further. So I suspect these were stones for the back porch that kept it upright, and that probably this here was the back of the Rich Cottage. And then if you look around, whoa, you begin to see all sorts of daffodils being planted up the hill on the backside of Mitchell as we are going to the Van Dusen Cottage area. Oh, I'm walking north towards the lake, and lo and behold, up ahead, I'm beginning to see some cheery daffodils to the left and to the right. Let's go exploring.
You are here. This was the location of the Van Dusen cottage. Note the location of this bench.
Alright, so I'm looking north across the Asylum Lake, and there's a pathway. I begin to see some daffodils. In fact, they probably lined a pathway because there were sidewalks and pathways that went through all the cottages. And then here's an interesting row of daffodils. They're sort of in a line, at least the front line is. And then there's sort of a back line with maybe some space in between. Now this is pure speculation, but there's a picture that shows that there was a chair right in front of the Mitchell cottage, which would have been right about here. So that's probably the outline from here to here to the outer wall, and from there we see more probably at the back side of the house. The Mitchell was considered the most beautiful of all the cottages. It had hardwood floors, and I believe the paneling was like UP pine wood, except it came from Virginia. And over here you have a look out over the lake. Oh, and there are some patrons from the Asylum Lake area walking by. So this was the view. And as an aside, across the lake, back in 1900, you would have seen the South Haven fruit train, locomotive steam engine, coming up that pathway, which was now called State Drive. I've walked a bit beyond that last point, and you see, here we go again. People planted the daffodils along the pathways, and this was probably the turnoff up ahead to, yeah, in fact it was the turnoff to the Van Dusen cottage. So when you see a daffodil, someone put it there on purpose at some point in the distant time.
That's all, folks.